Spooky D up in this P. All right, day 4 of the mix of the Rock Band Project 4. We're going to kind of put the final touches on this sucker. We got through pretty much processing all of the instruments. We've got our drums all EQ'd and compressed. We have everything sent to a drum bus or drum sum. And we also did some parallel compression with the drum overheads to add some wall of sound effect to our cymbals. We've got the bass tracks duplicated and processed, and we got those sent to a bass sum. We've got 3 guitar tracks, 2 of which are rhythm tracks and 1 of which is a solo. Those are routed to a guitar sum. And we have the vocal track, just a lonely single vocal track, all by its lonesome. So everything is routed into the submix, and then it comes out of the master fader. We haven't done a whole lot with panning. We've done a little bit with panning on the drum kit. This is semi-subjective, but this is what I do and what I was taught. With drums, I like to keep the snare in the center, the kick drum in the center. I keep the voice always in the dead center. I keep the bass guitar, the bass synth, or whatever's playing bass notes in the dead center. Other things I spread apart. So if I have stereo of something, some kind of rhythm chord-based instrument, like an acoustic guitar or a keyboard, an organ or something, I tend to get a stereo blend of that. If it's like a guitar with 2 mics on it, or just 2 guitar tracks like we have here, 2 rhythm guitar takes, I like to use those as a way of widening my mix. So you can do that by doing multiple takes of the guitar, or putting 2 mics on the acoustic guitar or something like that, or having like a left and right channel of an organ or something. If you don't have 2 channels of an organ and you just have 1 mic on a guitar, you can duplicate that 1 guitar track, and you can EQ them a little bit differently, where one has more highs and the other one has more lows. You can pan them apart, and you can also do this thing where you set the track out of phase, and it makes the mix sound very wide. I think we did that on the previous session where we had like an acoustic guitar or something, and then I put it slightly out of phase, and it made the speaker sound super wide. And when you do that, it opens up room in the middle of the mix for all these other instruments. So you kind of come up with a visual placement of the instruments in a room. And you think about this 3-dimensional organization of this stuff. So right now we've got kick, snare, and bass and voice dead center. Within the drum kit, I've got the toms kind of spread. My rack tom here is a little bit to the right, which actually, he was playing a 3-piece drum set. So kick, snare, rack, tom, floor tom. So actually, I think I might put the rack tom a little bit to the left. I like the floor tom to be on the right. You could do a little bit right, I don't know. But I'm going to pan the toms apart from the perspective of the drummer. I also have my overheads panned hard left and right in respect to the drummer, like stage left, stage right. So I've got that going on. The bass is dead center. The guitars, since I have 2 rhythm guitar tracks, they're both different takes, I believe. I have those 2 tracks panned left and right hard. Maybe it's too hard. I might lessen the amount of spread with those 2 guitars, because there's really nothing else that's going to be filling in the space between the voice and the far left outer extremities. So I might ease up on that left and right panning of my 2 guitar tracks. But the idea is I'm trying to create width and trying to make my mix sound wide and carve out space in the center for the voice and any other instruments to sort of have a lot of room to shine. I was doing this last night. I'm recording one of my bands in the studio, and we got drums and we got guitars and we got voices and everything overdubbed now, and I started to mix. Basically everything was centered. All the sounds were all dead centered, panned. And as I started to spread the instruments apart, put guitars wide and put instruments left and right of the voice, all of a sudden it was so much easier to balance dynamically and hear all the instruments because they weren't on top of each other. When you leave everything panned dead center or panned things to the same exact angle, you're putting two instruments right on top of each other. And it makes it harder to hear those instruments. If you can place them in different angles in the spectrum, it's not so hard to balance those things. You're not always turning things up and down. So it was weird because I started panning and all of a sudden I could hear the dobro and the mandolin and the banjo, and I could hear all the other instruments clearly because they weren't on top of one another. So panning helps with your balance too. Panning is balance. It's a balance of placement of things. If things exist in different parts of the stereo spectrum, they're going to be easier to hear and clear. And the same thing goes with frequency. You can balance instruments out and balance your mix with frequencies. That's why I'm using high pass, low pass filters all the time, so I can get stuff out of the way of other stuff. If I got bass guitar down low thumping away, I don't need my guitar down low thumping away too. Maybe a little bit, but it just means that I don't hear as much bass, or it's just muddier. They just fight with each other, and I don't hear clarity as much as I do when I carve a little bit of the low end out of the guitar and I let the bass kind of be in the low register and maybe give it some bright attack so it kind of pops out a little bit with the brightness of the string and pick noise, and I can actually hear the articulation of the notes. Yeah, just, all in effort so that everybody can hear every instrument at all times. So a lot of this stuff can be done by listening on stereo speakers or headphones. We all have headphones here, so that's kind of what we're dealing with right now. I might listen to my two guitars and just see what they feel like, left and right hard or left and right subtly panned. Yeah, I kind of feel like hard left and right is a little bit too much. Now I'm going to put it back with the rest of the band and listen to those guitars and just start kind of listening in context of the whole band and seeing what feels right when I change the amount of panning or how far it's panned left and right. Okay. Yeah, so panning guitars, the guitar solo is going to stay dead center because at the point of the guitar solo, the voice is out, and the guitar solo is the main attraction at that moment. Nothing is happening other than strumming of chords and playing of drum beats. So the main focus melodically is the guitar solo. That should be front and center. That's kind of the same thing with any mix. If there's a solo of an instrument and there's no other competing melodic things going on, it's nice to have it dead center so that it's taking the place of the voice, that was dead center and the main attraction. And then you can automate things and have the instrument pan back to the left or right or wherever it was sitting when it was playing rhythmic. So it's kind of the roles of the instruments also dictate where you're going to place it in the mix. If it's melodically leading the group, I would put it in the front and center during that time. Okay, cool. So a lot of the stuff you might listen to and start tweaking and spend some time with. I haven't spent enough time with it to do it perfect myself either, so we'll do that a little bit later. But the next thing I want to do here is we haven't added any reverb, any effects like reverb or delay. And we, of course, are going to do that. That's kind of like, a main thing to make music sound cool. But what delay and reverb does is it gives a depth to your mix. When you put something in a space, you can make it sound like it's in a church or a hallway or a bathroom or a recording studio or whatever. You can pick reverbs that have like a sound that defines a space, like a room. So we're going to do that. And also I might think about what instruments I want to have up front, close, and what instruments I want to have further back. So I might want the drums to be a little bit further back. Maybe I want the guitars to be a little bit back, but I want the guitar solo and the voice to be up front. I can accomplish whatever, sort of orientation or whatever placement of instruments in the room by adding reverb to them. More reverb is going to make it sound a little bit more distant. More reverb and less volume on a sound makes it sound really distant. So you can kind of control where things sit. If you want the voice to be whispering in your ear, like subtly whispering, like right in your eardrum, like don't put any reverb on it, and it sounds like the person's whispering in your face. Because essentially the microphone is right against the singer's mouth, and it sounds like someone's whispering in your face because it is whispering in your face. So you have to make it sit back if you want it to sit back by putting reverb on it. So you have to create that space, that definition of depth and width. So however you do that, those are some things that I use as far as my logic and placing things, but that's what we're going to kind of do with the final touches here. So with reverb and delay, we don't put these effects on a sound. I don't want to put reverb plugins directly on my voice track. Anytime you do stuff like that with effects like chorus or reverb or delay or whatever else, you're going to muddy up the sound and you're going to lose clarity and articulation of that instrument. So the way this works is you're going to create another auxiliary input track, and you're going to put the effect on that auxiliary input track, and then you're going to send a portion of the signal from your voice or your guitar or whatever else and feed it into this lonely reverb track, and you're going to add reverb in parallel with your other raw, clean sound. And that lets things stay crispy, clear, and articulate, yet feels like it's in a space. So it's using a reverb send and a reverb return track to accomplish that. So you have the clean sound and the reverb sound existing in parallel.
Could you also do it by duplicating the track?
You could totally do that too. It's kind of the same premise. You could duplicate the track and then put a bunch of reverb on it and then fade it up, bring it up in the mix a little bit. So the thing about the reverb return thing is there's no original. So okay.
No, I understand.
Yeah. It's like it's only reverb, where the other one's going to have the actual guitar track again with reverb on it.
Right.
So it's kind of like you're making the guitar way louder by adding another guitar track with reverb on it. It's going to affect your dynamic balance a little bit more than if you just put it on the return track. All of a sudden you just hear ghosty room reverb of the guitar rather than the guitar with the ghosty reverb on top of it. So yeah, you could kind of do the same thing as well. You just have to like watch your dynamics there because you're beefing up the sound of the guitar. So let's do that. Right now I have my drum, bass, and guitar sums as dark green. I'll probably use another color for my reverb return tracks. So I'm thinking here I might use some delay. It might be kind of cool to have some delay on the voice a little bit. Also, I like to give myself some flexibility with reverb. There's bright, short reverbs that kind of emulate the sound of a small room, like a bathroom or a bedroom or a small space. Then there's really long, dark room reverbs and hall reverbs that kind of ring out for a longer time. And I like those two aspects, and I kind of want to mix those together and have the flexibility to brighten up or darken up the reverb of something, make it long and short. So I always kind of do this, with a short verb and a long verb. So I'm going to have 2 reverb return tracks and 1 delay track. So let's create 3 auxiliary input stereo tracks. Command Shift N, type in the number 3, hold down Command, right arrow switches you to stereo, and down arrow switches you to auxiliary input. Go ahead and create those. Here they are. I'm going to change the color to a bright green so I can tell it apart. And I'm going to rename these one by one. So double clicking on the nameplate, I'm going to have my delay. And then next I'll have my short verb and long verb. Awesome. The next thing I want to do is solo safe my auxiliary input tracks. So hold down Command, click on the S's to solo safe. The next thing I need to do is send these reverbs, send the outputs of these reverbs to go to my mix bus or my submix. So I already have a bus set up called my sub or my mix bus, which routes directly into the input of my submix. So while these are selected here, I'm going to hold down Option Shift, select one of the outputs, and set that to be, from the bus category, the mix bus. So now the outputs of these are feeding into the mix bus, which feeds out of the master fader. All right. So the next thing I will do is create inputs for each of these and label them whatever bus. So if I go to my long verb and I select the input and go to the bus category, my next available bus on my machine is bus 1516. So I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to rename it long bus. Similarly to the short verb, the input I'm going to set to be the next available stereo bus, which is 17 and 18. I'm going to rename this short bus. And then for the delay, I'll select the next available input bus, bus 1920, and rename that delay bus. Okie dokie. So, the next thing I want to do is have the ability to send any and all signals from any track, any submix track, into the reverb or the delays. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to select every track except for my delay, long verb, short verb, and my submix master fader. So basically everything from my guitar sum all the way to the beginning of my session, minus the click track, because we're done with that. I'm going to select all of the instrument tracks and some tracks as well. So with everything selected here, I can go to my first sends category while holding down Option and Shift. And I can choose from my list of buses the delay bus. And what's going to happen is across every single track, every single first send slot will be the delay bus. I'm going to do this on the second one, same deal, hold down Option and Shift. And this next bus that I'm going to choose will be the short bus. And then the third will be the long bus. Any questions on that? How I did that? I know I did it really quick, but I was just kind of repeating the same kind of process. Anybody want?
Not exactly on that.
Uh-huh.
The next step, you would open up each little individual window and then choose how much you want to send to that area.
Exactly. So now that I have these buses set up on the sends, I can hold down Command and click on the far left corner where that arrow is, and then expands a fader view for all of these buses. So basically, if I want to send some reverb, I want to send my kick. Well, I don't want to send the kick, but I want to send my snare to the reverb. I can turn up the volume on my snare sum, because that's basically a combination of all these tracks together. I can send some of that to the reverb. I can send some of this and this and this and this to the delay or whatever it is, and mix in these effects subtly, instrument by instrument. Sometimes it's easier to go by groups of instruments, like maybe you go to the drum sub or the drum sum over here, and you just send reverb to the whole drum kit or the whole entire guitar collection of guitars, I might send all those simultaneously to the reverb if I'm trying to do it quick and dirty. Or I might be very painstakingly specific about which guitar gets which reverb and how much of it. So you can get really detailed and specific by instrument, or you can just paint with broad strokes and send reverb, all the drum sounds to the reverb at the same time. But yeah, you have all that control. Cool. So with reverb, I think about the instruments that are going to be using the reverb the most. It's going to be snare drum is a big one. My toms and hi-hat and overheads are going to get some of that too. My guitar is going to get verb. My voice is going to get some verb. I might add some delay to the voice, maybe. I don't usually send reverb and delay, or I don't usually send bass and kick to the reverb and in the delay. Maybe some of the kick or the brighter aspects of the kick. But I want the low frequency stuff to be not so muddy. If you put reverb on bass, the bass notes are bleeding into each other. You're losing articulation with those bass notes, and you're building up muddy low frequencies in your mix. Not something I tend to want to do. Not that you couldn't send reverb bass in the reverb and it still sound fine, but I just don't like to add to the muddiness. But of course, I might break that rule if I feel like my mix needs it. So that's an idea. Take it or leave it. If it works, cool. If it doesn't, you need more reverb on low frequencies, do it. But there's just that's my logic with that. I tend to focus on higher frequency instruments that actually carry into the reverb. The bass is going boom, 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 boom. I don't need reverb to make the bass sound any more interesting or change the envelope of the reverb of the sound of the bass, because it's already just going bum, bum, bum. There's really no room for reverb trails anywhere in that anyway, so you wouldn't even hear it if I did put reverb on the bass. Anyway, okay, cool. So we'll start with the drum kit. I'm going to solo the drum kit, so I'm going to select the drum kit as a group down in my group window, and then I'm going to solo the drums as a whole, start my song somewhere in the beginning. Listen for a second to my balance. Okay, cool. So I'm going to turn off the drum group. Actually, first I'm going to disable all of my solos on my drum group, then disable the drum group so I can individually solo things like the kick drum and snare drum. So I might send a little bit to the kick. I'm going to experiment with sending some reverb on to the kick drum, but I'm not going to use the low drum. I'm going to think about the higher parts of the drum kit, of the kick drum. So kick, that's low. So I've got my beater on KB, and I've got my front of my drum head on KF. I'm going to try sending some of the beater into the reverb. Oh, I forgot. I don't have any reverb on anything. Let's go back and do that first. Okay, so delay, short verb, long verb. These are my return tracks. I need to add plugins to these so I actually have some kind of reverb. So let's start with the long verb. I'm going to do this first. I'm going to put an EQ before my reverb. I'll show you why later. And then on the second slot, I'm going to find a reverb. So none of these reverbs are super great, but they're all we have. So let's use the air reverb. Super basic, but we'll be able to dial it in and get a decent, warm, long verb sound. So long verbs are things like hall reverbs, stadium, church, cave, I don't know, things that are big spaces. So I can go up to the presets where it says factory default. This is a group of presets that are just preset for the reverb, so I don't have to dial it in myself. And I'm going to go with, I don't know, let's try, I've never tried opera. Let's see what opera sounds like. And I've got my kick drum armed, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit play and let my kick drum kick into the reverb. Okay, so you're not hearing anything because I haven't turned up the long verb bus. So to get this to do anything, you have to go to your long verb. If you just put the reverb plugin on the long verb itself, you're going to have to go over here to the long verb, the long bus, expose the faders, and then turn up that individual fader. It's hard to tell. I'm going to go with my snare drum, actually. It's easy for me to hear a snare drum and like tell you if the reverb's dark or bright or whatever. So I'm going to go to the snare and solo the snare track, or actually all the snare tracks all simultaneously. There we go. That's not bright. It's not too bad. It's kind of bright. Okay, I'm going to try large or medium hall maybe next and see what that sounds like. I don't know about that hissy high frequency stuff. Cathedral. Wow. That's really big sounding, right? That room goes on forever. I kind of like the tone of it, though. I can take my room size down and make that a little bit less huge. I can turn the reverb time down. So what I'm looking for here is something that's got a decently long trail. Like my snare hits, ka, ka. I want the reverb to die off before the next snare hit happens. That's kind of what I'm going for as far as my reverb time. And that's I think that's pretty decent there. So I'm gonna have that be my long verb, but my long verb is a little bright. I wished it was a little darker. So here's what we can do. If I go to my EQ plugin that's set up on my long verb return track, I can darken up the sound of my reverb by using what kind of filter?
High pass or low pass?
Low pass, yeah. I'll just roll off some of the high frequencies and warm it up a bit. Super easy. There we go. Okay, it's a lot of reverb, so I might dial it down, in my mix. But I'm all the way up to -6 dB with that. That's pretty hot. That's almost to unity gain. Okay, cool. So I kind of like the sound of that reverb. Let me put it on the voice and see what it sounds like on the voice, because that'll be a good test too. So I've got my voice track soloed, and I've got my long verb send right here. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the voice, maybe find a part where I'm actually singing in front of a chorus or something, and loop that.
It's harder now than
Sorry.
it's ever been. It's hot as hell, and so I'm drinking, searching for release in any way of mine. Shades of blue, green, black, and white. As you lie awake on a sleepless night, your mind is wandering, our thoughts are pondering a lie. Watching shadows dance.
Okay, so I get an idea of what the reverb sounds like color-wise. It's pretty dark. I could brighten it up a bit, or I could not brighten it up a bit. I'm going to leave it there. I think that's pretty decent for super cheap basic reverb. And I'm going to go with the second reverb return track now. And I'm going to go with some short verb. So I might do the same thing in case my reverb is way too bright. I'm going to throw an EQ ahead of it just for funsies. And then I'm going to go and add a reverb, air reverb plugin right after that EQ. And I'm going to go with something small, something bright, like a small room, empty room, basic small, something that might have a brighter, smaller sound. So I'm thinking small room initially. I want to see what it sounds like on my snare, so I'll go to my snare tracks and solo those, and then turn up the fader on my short bus so I can hear what it sounds like on the snare sum. Yeah, really bright sounding, really weird. Not a fan of that setting. What was that? I'll never use that again. Small room. Okay, yep, never do that again. Let's go with drum room and see what that sounds like. If I turn it down, it's not bad. It's kind of bright. I could dial a little bit of the brights down with this thing. Yeah, it's not bad. You know, you could fudge with it a little bit. But essentially, I've got a short reverb that's a little bit brighter, and then a dark reverb that's longer and a little bit darker. And I can control the darkness and the brightness as well as how big the room is by changing parameters of the reverb plugin to be what I want it to be. I put these instruments in a space. I design a space for these instruments to play in because there's no natural reverb maybe other than the room mics, which there are none, so it's just overhead mics is the only ambient room sound in this mix. Now, if I had a drum kit that I recorded with very distant room mics and I had a room sound already, I wouldn't need to do a whole lot with my reverb on my drums. One of the other mixes I'm working on, I have the drum set in a huge, massive dance hall, and I have, microphones set up 15 feet apart from the drum set, and this really rich room sound. It's natural reverb. I don't need any reverb. All I need to do is match the other instruments to that reverb so it sounds like they're not in two opposite spaces. So sometimes you don't need to do this. I have to do this because I didn't record the room mics and get a room ambience sound of natural reverb for my drum kit. So I have to create that synthetically like this. Okay, so the other thing I want to do is maybe mess with some delay. So delay is kind of interesting because delay is a rhythmic, time-based type of thing. So I'm going to go to the delay here. We've got aerodynamic delay, multi-delay, delay 3. I don't even know. How about aerodynamic delay? Maybe that's easy to use and simple.
You're gonna EQ that too.
Oh yeah. There's EQ filters on these as well. Yeah. So you could actually do that probably on. Yeah. So you could actually EQ the reverb within the plugin as well. It's kind of a redundancy, but I don't know. It's a trick. Not all reverbs have straight ahead, easy to understand filters, so you can just put an EQ before it and you can filter it like that. Same deal. It'll give you the same result. But anyway, so with the delay, if I have a click track in a grid setup, which I do, my delay time is going to be sequenced and clocked to the metronome. So I'm going to have a delay time that is reminiscent exactly of the beat and a subdivision of the beat. So let's see what happens with the snare. And when I turn up this delay on the snare, I'll start to dial in and figure out what my snare delay settings are. So it's not super fast. I need it to be a little bit faster. Okay. Where's my settings? Let me try 16D. Okay, I'm getting there. Let's see what this sounds like. So I'm definitely not going to use that on the snare drum, but I would probably use it on the voice. Let me solo the voice here and add some delay to the voice and see what we think.
Take a step.
Oh my lord, it's so loud.
Been inside this hill, and so we're drinking, searching.
ta ta ta, searching for a dates and never ta 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 ta. So that's like a subdivision I can get into. Ta 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 ta, kill kill kill, die 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 die. You know, it's part of the rhythm of the song. It's part of the you know, it's kind of got that rhythm subdivision already kind of active in the song. So that's why I want to use it. It's a musical decision. These delay times aren't just random delays. Like they are clocked to a 16th note or an 8th note or something like that. So they kind of rhythmically repeat and trail off with the rhythm of the song. So something like this, I'm happy with that. I'm gonna leave it. I think that's cool. Maybe I put it on the guitar and see what it sounds like on the guitar and solo that on the guitar solo, because I might want to have a little bit of shred sauce on there. Let's see what's up with the guitar solo. There's green. So this guitar solo track is right next to the Vox track. I don't know why I was missing it. So that kind of adds to it nicely too. I could probably throw a little bit of delay on the guitar solo and make it sound 80s metal pretty easily. Maybe fatten up the tone and not play a Strat. But yeah, cool. So yeah, delay is kind of a nice thing, but you use it subtly. You don't want your everything being like, you know, you want it to be like just a subtle little sprinkle of the transient echoing away. And it sounds still crystal clear if it's a parallel, if it's mixed in parallel, not on top of the actual guitar track. And that's the thing about using guitar pedals, is you're putting effects directly on your guitar's tone, and it always just gets a little muddy and a little muddier every time you throw an effect. But that's kind of what you got to do unless you have two amps, one dry and one with your effects. And some guitar players that have a big stage crew and have a big rig and two amps on stage, one will be a raw, clean guitar with no effects, no reverb, no delay, and the other might be an amp that has only effects running through it with the guitar tone, so that you still have the punch and clarity. It's the same process as mixing. You just have a parallel channel of effects. So yeah, that's a thing. Sometimes with live performance as well. Okay, cool. So let's do this as well. Let me talk about this, and then you guys will have what time is it? Okay, yeah. I want to give you guys a full half an hour to kind of do this. So the last thing I'll say is basic mastering. Really quick and dirty mastering. What is mastering? Mastering is essentially it's bringing up the dynamic volume of a track. You're managing the dynamic volume, usually by compressing or limiting the song and getting it up to a commercial level so it's just as loud as someone else's song on the radio, without sacrificing the balance and the tone and the EQ and the distortion and, you know, all the good qualities of your mix. So it's kind of a dance of bringing things up in volume, and also checking your EQ balance and your mix balance. So the way to do this, and the way that I usually do this, is I will throw in a couple tracks as references. So I'll find some rock and roll recordings that are similar in style to a rock band like this. I'll create a stereo track, and then I'll put that track in here, and I'll go back and forth between some famous rock band recording, and then my mix. Try to get them at the same dynamic level, and then listen to the kick, snare, bass, voice, cymbals, guitar, balance, and just make sure that I'm in the ballpark. So when we go from whoever rock band, it's super famous, compared to my mix, it's in the ballpark. And it's not going to be like, oh, wow, that sounds really weak and thin, or whoa, that sounds really quiet, or whoa, that sounds really heavy and bassy and dark. It's kind of in the ballpark. I can make those subtle corrections with an EQ on my mix bus, as well as some limiters or compressors that bring up my dynamic volume of my mix and bring it to the same dynamic level as this other song. So that's kind of usually how that goes. So what I might do is create another track. Like I'll do a stereo audio track, And then somewhere maybe on my computer, hopefully I have a song. You guys might have one here if we go to the, where are we at? Fall, spring, fall 19. If we go inside of our project 5, no, that's 161. Oh my God, 163, 602. Let me see if I have some songs in here. I want you guys to have something to reference. Mixed day demo. Here we go. So references. So you guys could probably get something out of here. This zipped folder called references, if you download it, what's inside of it is a few MP3s of rock bands, I think. I don't know who it is, but let's open it up and see what it is. What Gets You Alone, Modern Jesus, Don't Lie. I don't even know who these are, but Vampire Weekend. This is Portugal the Man. And then I don't know what this is. This is The Defined Fits. So a couple like pop rock recordings here that you can easily throw into your session just by dragging and dropping. So I get my Pro Tools session up here and maybe create a couple more stereo audio tracks. So I have 3 stereo audio tracks. And then I'm going to drag in these 3 tracks as references. And then listen to my mix and compare it to these mixes. So I'd have to mute these or they're all going to play at the same time. But, you know, I can get an idea of where my mix sits if I play this song a little bit. And then I go ahead and solo one of these tracks. You hear how much louder that is? It's way, way, way louder than my song. Right? You guys hear that difference? Also, look at the meter. Look at the master. It's peaking. Like they've limited this and brought the dynamics up to the point to where it's just hitting red. That's what happens in popular music. Everyone turns their shit up as loud as they can. So if your song is not turned up all the way as loud as it can go and distorting, it's going to sound way quieter than whoever's pop record. So the solution for that, on my submix, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a EQ on there so I can make some subtle EQ corrections, depending on what I want to hear more of and what I need more as far as my low end and high end compared to the other song. And I'm going to use some Maxim plugins. These are limiters. This is the Maxim dynamic plugin. It's under the dynamics category all the way at the bottom called Maxim. And what this is like a compressor where the threshold is a brick wall and the sound will never go above the threshold. So you use it like you do a compressor. And here's how you're going to use it. So I'm going to link the threshold and the ceiling knobs together by clicking the link button. I'm going to press play and try to only play my song and not this song. And I'm going to bring these down, these two faders down until I start getting attenuation. So this is how much gain reduction I'm going to get. So I want to be in the ballpark of like 2. I don't want to be too harsh with this. Then I can bring the ceiling up a bit and give some more juice to it. And I might actually repeat this numerous times. So I'm going to copy this plugin down to the next section, holding down Option. If I need more juice, I'm going to stack 2 Maxim plugins. So I'm limiting this in 2 stages. What's that? Well, if you want it to affect your entire mix, you're going to want to put it on the sub mix. Now, you don't want to put it on the master fader, though you could, because these reference tracks that I'm using to gauge my volume of my mix, they are feeding into the master fader too. So if I have limiters on my master fader, it's going to limit these songs as well, and that won't give me an accurate representation of what's loud and what's soft. So this thing here allows me to be like, okay, here's my song. It's ripping up there almost to unity gain. Well, where this other band's song is all the way up there. Right? So I can see just how far I'm off as far as my levels go to getting as loud as this other band in their album, their mix. So I'm going to do another one. I'm going to do a third Maxim in a row. 3 of them in a row. And I'm going to be careful about how much attenuation I have. I have to watch the attenuation, because if I'm going like 7, 8, 5 dB of attenuation, I am really affecting the quality of the sound and maybe distorting it. So this is a very subtle, careful thing you have to do. You have to bring the volume up carefully, bit by bit by bit, without being too extreme. So I feel like all these are a little bit too extreme. I might maybe should be more of in the ballpark of a threshold here and a ceiling here. Even though nothing's happening there, I want to do it lightly, stage by stage. All right, so I would fool with these for a little bit here, trying to find the sweet spot to where I'm not juicing anything too much. I don't see weird shit like that. I don't even know what that is, but it's probably not a good thing. The little red or orange thing there. But what's going on, and once I listen to it and realize if it's distorting or it's clear or not, or better or worse, I can now compete against this commercial record of Portugal the Man that's all the way up to this. So I'm in the ballpark, you know? Like dynamically, I'm just as loud as that other song. I need to listen back to it, make sure I'm not distorting and not losing quality, and EQ is all messed up. So anyway, that's kind of like the final process to get your song up to a commercial level. Quick and dirty mastering, subtle EQ corrections, limiters, maybe staging a few different limiters so that you can slowly crank up the gain and get it to the level of like some commercial recording today. Without sacrificing the quality of the sound. It's easier when you have better plugins, like better limiter plugins and stuff, but this will work and you can pull it off. You might have to stage 3 of those things in a row. Okay, so enough with me talking. You guys do some mixing, and I'll leave you alone. If you guys want to spend the last 5 minutes listening to each other's mixes and getting an idea, bounce your mix to me at like 5 till. And then we'll listen to them in class real quick and just kind of go from one to the next and get an idea of where people are at dynamically.
Yeah. I'm not gonna